Welcome to the Warning Track Power Hour. I'm Andrew Scaff. He's Mike Werman. Today we will get into the Royals mid-season grade post All-Star break now, and talk a little bit about the some NFL offseason news. But we'll lead with, I guess, the conclusion of our about 5-week discussion about the MLB Draft. And we now have results from the 20 rounds. Grades are in from some independent sources, or not so independent sources, but
it's the sources that are making the draft list prospects, and then how well did those draft list prospect picks? Well, how well did the major league team picks match up with the draft lists that those people made? And so whoever got the closest to their ideas gets to be the best rater, and whoever gets like the number one pick will have a if it's a person they like, they always get also.
But at this point, there's really the only way to evaluate it before they play a single game for the franchise.
It's worthless kind of evaluating it.
But so you kind of will be like maybe looking back at this every so often to try to see, if any of this analysis is correct or not. But
I guess first impressions matter for something, but this is
not really. I mean,
we talk about how dumb NFL draft grades are. Right after the draft,
in NBA or NCAA polls matter to you? Like, is that something that you care about?
When I was a kid, I did.
Yeah.
It matters, I guess, not very much, but that was a big deal for a while. Well, before the BCS and stuff like that, the polls were very important because that would determine national championship matchups, or who was the national champion. There were two teams that were tied, that were undefeated. Which one that they think was better. That would determine it in football, especially. In basketball, you want to get high seeds and stuff and be number one. I think it was the rankings were fun and I enjoyed it, but the draft, right? Actually measure, because those actually at least measured performance.
Well, it's projected performance with no actual
preseason. I guess the
time, right? So
I guess the preseason drafts are projected performance, and you could say that those might have an outsized influence on later ranking lists. Even so, a team that was ranked highly at the beginning, is given a grace period that a team that was lower ranked would not.
And then maybe lose the first game, they'll be written off maybe for the whole season, right?
Yeah. But I think Major League Baseball drafts are worse simply because they have Major League Baseball power rankings, because at least those measure the performance of the team this season, rather than something that you have no idea how the players are going to do until 5 years after the draft, at least, and
somewhere in that area.
It's silly.
Or to compare drafts to each other, at least anyway. It takes closer to 5 to 6 years to start to analyze it. But
so I don't.
Probably the big story, though, for at least from the initial part of the MLB draft, teammates were drafted 1, 2. Maybe not the order that it seemed like the experts were projecting, right? Paul Skeens
Skeens was thought maybe to be number 2 or even number 3. I think. But the Skeens, right-handed pitcher from LSU, went to the Pirates. He was number 1 on a lot of lists, though, especially kind of coming. Well, Dylan Cruz was second, maybe. But I think people also thought that the Florida outfielder Langford was going to be top 3. And high school player Max Clark was from the Tigers, picked at number 3. But that was a high school player, and the Royals also picked high school player for their first round pick, 8. Blake Mitchell. What do you think of the Blake Mitchell selection?
Well, what I would say as the lead-in would be that of the first 10 picks in the draft, only one team went outside the top 10 prospects from the rankings on MLB, and it was the Royals, who did go down to the 14th projected pick ranked prospect to get
Yeah.
Blake Mitchell. Yeah, it's a big gamble, I think, anyway, at least. But it seems like he has a lot of skills. He throws 90 miles an hour plus 93, 95 from the mound. So
Yeah.
maybe there's more than one way they could use him, but he is a catcher, and so it seems as though they're thinking about Sal Perez potentially, catching less or maybe retiring at the time that Blake Mitchell would be, approaching the major leagues. That seems
Did
to
you
be.
see that Blake Mitchell was also going to go to LSU? That was
Oh, I didn't know that.
where he had signed.
Yeah.
And the LSU, I see an LSU article. He was they said number 8 high school prospect, number 1 catcher in the country. He was the number 1 recruit in the state of Texas.
For
So
college, though.
yeah, for college, going to college. But
Yeah.
that's pretty good. But
Yes.
usually at least he's from Tech. The idea was, well, at least one point, you don't want to pick a northern player as much as a southern player. Like you want Florida or Texas or California because those kids can play baseball all year round. And
Yeah. The level of competition they're going against is probably
higher too. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
Who was the Royals? The Royals was it Chris Lubanski? Remember him as a first round pick? He was from like Massachusetts or somewhere. And Pennsylvania. He was from Pennsylvania. And people thought he was the 5th overall pick in 2003. And he was from Norristown, Kennedy Kenrick Catholic High School. Can you say Kennedy Kenrick Catholic?
No, I'm not gonna
3 times fast.
No, can't do it.
Kennedy
Can't be done.
Catholic. It's really hard to say. But yeah, wasn't Mike Piazza also from Norristown, Pennsylvania?
No idea.
We talked about him recently in relation to Tommy Lasorda. And yeah, he was born in Norristown. Yeah.
Okay.
So, hey, that was a connection. I'm surprised I remembered that from a few weeks ago. But yeah, he was Tommy Lasorda's godson or something like that. And they were both from Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is near Philly. And Chris Lubanski was from Norristown,
also from there.
But Piazza was was he 60?
Yeah, 60
round.
Yeah, 59, 60th round, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but the Lubanski one never paid off because he was 62nd round, because people thought, well, he didn't develop very quickly, and that was maybe also a problem with Bubba Starling. They thought also from Kansas, like high school player from a northern state wouldn't necessarily do so well.
I don't know what that actually means. That seems maybe more granular than you would think.
But I think I've seen that discussion before. So like if we
really,
yeah, you want a player who is from like you who plays baseball, you can play baseball year round, I guess is the technique.
Yeah.
And so Mazzucato was another one last year because he's from Connecticut.
But aren't they playing year round all the time anyway for all these guys? I mean, why would they be ranked higher if they weren't?
And like Mike Trout was from New Jersey, so like he was pretty good. But
in this draft, the Royals sort of maybe skipped who was probably the highest rated catching prospect was a college junior, Kyle Teal, was available, but the Royals did not pick him. Instead, went down to get a high school player, which I did not heard this before that draft, but analysts were very quickly to note that high school catchers are apparently the lowest success rate for prospects to become major leaguers. Is that concerning to you that the Royals would have picked into this group when they didn't have to? But that was the guy they wanted.
Yeah, so you can say, well, each individual player is different. Prior to Patrick Mahomes, it was said, well, a Texas Tech quarterback is not a good quarterback, or a Big 12 quarterback is not somebody you should draft. Like it's like these, like if you just predict like, oh, this like there's those players have nothing to do with each other. Like they're like there's not a
It's
connection at
making a
all. So like each
generalization.
individual
You're
player, like
categorizing things that
you're
may
just
not be
categorizing it and like
general.
saying, well, people with I would say you could probably even say like people with the last name that starts with a certain letter are not as good as people whose last name starts with other letters, and there's not much
Well, they did
there's
that with what, blue eyes for quarterbacks at one time, right? Light colored eyes.
oh yeah.
And or and fielding positions in baseball even, I think too. They said that the people with lighter colored eyes performed worse in day games,
Hmm.
which seems a little strange.
Yeah, so in some places it says first initial I'm seeing on this article, first initial of last name could foretell one's success or setback in
Hmm.
life. And those with names of in the latter half of the alphabet, like us,
Hmm.
are negatively impacted. An occurrence that can begin at an early age, I guess, because people used to sit in alphabetical order and we would be stuck in the back. Like if they ask questions, they start with the A's and B's, and then
Sure.
especially someone with a W, we're I'm pretty far back. I was like last alphabetically quite a bit, or second or third to last usually in most of my classes. Um,
I wouldn't have been quite last because you would have been there too. So
yeah, it says
right.
if your name is at the end of the alphabet, you're less likely to be identified as by teachers as outstanding students. I don't know about that necessarily. Maybe,
Yeah.
but this is from 1957 through 2011. So I would say the earlier years, maybe because they did
Yeah.
stuff so much alphabetically and it was so regimented.
Yeah.
And but there's also this idea that people with I think this was a Malcolm Gladwell idea that people born earlier in the year do better than people born later in the year in like hockey, especially
Hmm.
because hockey divisions um, are divided in calendar year. So like
Yeah.
especially when you're a little kid, somebody who like you're 7 years old and you're born in January, you play a kid that's was born in December. Well, you're like almost a year older than, and you're gonna do
Yeah.
a lot better probably because you, especially as so even as time goes on, you still have had more practice basically.
Right.
So I don't know when was Blake Walters uh Blake Mitchell drafted. I mean, when was he born? Do you know?
August 3rd, 2004. 2004, Mike.
2004. So he is going to be 19.
Yes.
So you could say that he was older on the older side for his high school class
Sure.
because he would have turned 18 before he started his senior year in high school.
Yeah.
And maybe that may be a good sign, or it might be a false positive because he's been a little bit older than his competition.
Right.
But maybe it builds up confidence though. It's one of those. Yeah, it was a Malcolm Gladwell thing. I can't remember
Yeah. Well, it can go one of more than one way, right?
maybe it
So
was freakonomics. Maybe it was freakonomics. It was either freakonomics or they're the same basically.
yeah,
Types of thinking.
the analysis is similar, right? So
Yeah, pop economic or mathematical kind of distributions and things like that. But uh,
it did look like a lot of high school players were drafted pretty high this year, though. I think more than expected. Were you surprised how many high
well,
school kids were drafted
I
this
thought it would be mostly college kids,
year?
but I thought that the Royals would draft a lot of high school because I thought they would try to do something different from what other teams
Yeah.
would be doing because it seems like the smart money is on college players. But as we talked about last year or
It
last week,
depends on where you are in your development cycle, though, right? So if you
yeah,
need,
you want somebody that's younger though too. Yeah,
get people higher in the system faster, you should be drafting college kids. If you're more patient, like, oh, I just won a championship, I don't need, new major leaguers right away. Maybe you draft more high school kids and get more potential upside, but maybe
Yeah.
lower.
The
Too.
idea is, yeah, high schools are more hit or miss, and maybe college players. But like, remember the last time the Royals were in kind of this situation, or one of a similar time when they had a not like the highest pick, but also fairly high in the first round. One it reminds me of the Christian Cologne draft when Cologne was picked, I think 2010 at number 4 or number 5. Was he 4 overall?
I think four.
He was
Yeah.
4. Like Manny Machado was number 3, and
Right.
Bryce Harper was number 1. So like Chris Sale was later. He was like a prospect that was probably ranked higher than Cologne in a lot of things, but Cologne was seen as a high floor prospect as a shortstop, even though he was slow and had no power and was small. Uh,
Mm.
and I think you mentioned that you wouldn't have traded that Cologne pick for anybody because of Cologne's
No, I
heroics.
didn't say that.
Oh, I
I'm just saying you could
overstepped
justify the pick based on
to
the
justify it.
outcome of his performance in specifically 2 games that changed the Royals' fortune. That's what I
Yeah.
was.
So you think, okay? So would you have
So,
selected
so I
in
would say,
hindsight?
even though the pick was not great, like for his career, I'd still call him a Royals Hall of Famer because of his performance in those 2 games.
Okay. Would you instead though? Would you rather had Chris Sale,
Yes,
who's been
the team would have been better across those years, probably with Sale than
Chris
without.
Sale was drafted in 2010, and he actually made the majors in 2010. So if
Yeah,
you want somebody who was low risk, it seems like Sale probably was because he was already he was a college player um, at that point at least. Yeah, he made 21 appearances in 2010,
well,
and then another 58 as a reliever. So he kind of had the Brandon Finnegan um, pathway. Like start out very early as a reliever in the league, and then maybe we're gonna like I think that's what the Royals would have done with Finnegan, tried to transition him into a starter, but they decided to trade for Johnny Cueto 2015. But if they had Sale, they might not have traded for Cueto, and uh,
they may not have needed to do any of that, right?
yeah,
Or maybe they
um,
would have ruined Sale before he even got to the majors.
that's I doubt it since he made it so quickly.
It's not a developmental issue, right? It's a
Yeah, he was
apparently was
by,
a skill.
by age 23 in 2020 in 2012, he was an all-star, sixth in the Cy Young, and then for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row, he was no worse than top 6 in the Cy Young. So he was,
Hmm.
yeah, he's had not so great success after reaching age 30. Basically, he's kind of
Yeah.
fallen off
Well, he's been
injury
injured a lot.
injury cliff. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. He was like he was the best available probably. Now in
Knowing
hindsight for sure.
knowing performance, right? Exactly. Hindsight.
But he was also ranked just as highly, and
Yeah.
by your estimation, I think, well, he was a left-handed pitcher. I think there was Drew Pomerantz was taken second or fifth or something. He was taken higher, but
He was taken, yeah, around there, but I think the thought was that he and Pomerantz and Sale would be the first 2 pitchers off the board, I believe. And it was kind of a toss up as to which one would go higher than the other. I believe is what
yeah,
the
that sounds
pre-draft
familiar to me
analysis.
too. And well, of the left-handed pitchers at least, Jameson Tyon
I
was taken,
was there too. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
he did go.
he's not had a really great career. He's kind of hung around
Yeah,
and kind of made a mini kind of comeback in the last couple of years. Now he's on the White Sox, but he's not doing very well for the White Sox this year. But he had
no.
a solid season for the Mets last year.
Really,
So
no
like,
one in the White Sox is really doing that well, though. So it's
yeah, well, compared to the Royals, the White Sox are doing pretty well.
uh,
Maybe the Royals should have kept Pedro Grifol. Do you think that?
maybe
Um,
Pedro Grifol has ruined the White Sox. I don't
yeah,
know.
maybe.
Yes.
Um, do you think he has? Well, this is one of those questions that okay. So, um, do you think he has made both teams worse by leaving the Royals? He made the
Mm,
Royals worse, but he also made the White Sox worse by coming to the White Sox
mm.
because the Royals were so much worse than because like maybe you could say that Grifol was an above average influence on the Royals, but
Hmm.
he's a below average influence on the White Sox.
I think you could make that argument. I don't think he had anything to do with either of the things, but I think the
Oh,
White Sox organization is kind of a mess, and the
yeah,
Royals are, I think, apparently have not actually free of the Dayton Moore influence.
yeah. They seem to pick a lot of high school guys and people with similar names in this
Yes,
draft.
three Blakes drafted in the Royals
Three
selections.
Blakes. It was Blake Mitchell,
Blake Walters,
Blake Walters,
and then their 20th pick was Blake Wilson.
Blake Wilson, Walters, which is all BW or BM, which
Hmm.
isn't a great set of initials. It reminds me of a story you used to tell of your parents thinking of naming you Andrew Scott Scaff. Was that a joke, or was that a thought until the initials were sent?
I'm not sure actually. I don't know
They're
if it
actually
was, maybe they were just messing with me or something at one time.
probably they have David Scott.
Uh,
Yeah, that's one of the things you would start. Like you'd think you'd see that kind of immediately, probably. But David Andrew Scaff, um, who is the most successful Blake in Major League
ooh,
history?
no clue.
Currently, there are uh, Blake Snell is a pretty good player.
Yeah. Yes.
Blake Trinan,
Trinan.
Trinan,
Yeah,
yeah,
Trinan. Really pitcher.
Trinan. I've heard it both ways. I never remember what it is.
I think it's Trinan. Yeah.
Yeah, Blake Lolly.
No, none of that one.
Um, looks like nobody. A lot of people were given the name Blake, but then they like I guess maybe when they were born, Blake Stein. His given name was I guess William Blake Stein. I guess
Hmm.
uh and Blake Stein, former Royal. Um,
Yes.
another he was only sixth, like he was sixth round pick of the Cardinals. He wasn't actually picked by the Royals.
Hmm.
And he went to Oakland. He was one of those like Jermaine Dye trades or something. Like when the Royals were trading their best players to Oakland every year, basically they went. It was the Damon or Dye or whoever happened to be good on the Royals, and the Royals would get like really bad return, like Terrence Long or somebody that was like long in the tooth or like seemed
Yeah.
like they were pretty good, but Billy Bean would kind of fleece them. But the Royals did actually do better.
We
Um,
needed more utility infielders and right.
yeah,
That's the position group that we really needed a lot of.
yeah, the Royals were they could always use more like middling to below average players. There's a guy named Sheriff Blake who played in the majors. I think he played the most years of any Blake. Sheriff Blake,
Hmm.
aka John something Blake. But he was born in Beckley, West Virginia. Um, or he died in Beckley, West Virginia. He was born in West Virginia, which he was where 10 war over. I don't know if he's the most successful. Blake Snell's probably the most successful. But Sheriff Blake, John Frederick Blake, was the longest lasting. Well,
Hmm.
it's the last name of Blake, so it's a little
Right.
different. But Blake Walters, Blake Mitchell, Blake
Wilson.
Wilson. Do you have any Robert Blake? Do you have any idea which Blake is going to be better?
Well, it seems like no, I really have no clue. Uh, it seemed like the second pick, Blake Walters, is like more like in line with prospect ranking to the pick selection at least. That was probably the closest that the Royals had in most of the selections anyways, is like what the expected prospect draft would be. But
Yeah,
they've gotten a little bit of value there. I guess he's another pretty hard throwing right-handed pitcher. Um, I might say Walters right now, but I really have no clue. There's no way to know. How can you know, right? Do you have a guess as to which Blake will be the best? First to the
um,
majors?
I'm gonna be optimistic and say is Mitchell. I think the Royals really hit it out of the park with their high school catcher. When they were maligned for picking the high school catcher, it reminds me of the being maligned for picking the high school pitcher. And then when they went safe, they ended up with Christian Colon, who sucked. But
Yes.
when they reached on a high school player rather than going safe on a college player, I think they've been better.
Yeah.
They've had some good college players like Alex Gordon.
So do you think though that that if you're trying to evaluate the general manager, say in a couple years, would you say that the people that he skipped over to make the selection, if any of them end up having better careers than the guy that he picked, those are all chances that for this pick to be a failure? Then is that
Somewhat, I think.
I see it a bit that way, at least anyway.
I think somewhat you do that. I think you can say everyone's not gonna there if you have more hits than misses, like
Yeah.
so if you pick a guy lower than other people, like if you pick a guy higher than other people would have, and he does really well, I think that's a win for you. Also, if you pick a guy lower than other people, a lot of people thought, and he does well for you, I think that's good in another way. That's
Yeah.
kind of good in the fact that you weren't incompetent,
Right.
unlike all these other teams. But if you pick a guy that is higher and it's a risk and he does really well, that shows that you are savvy, like a positive savvy rather than like a just like, oh, you're just not as bad as these other people. Because like you
Yeah.
could say like the Tom Brady pick in the 6th round of the
Yeah.
NFL draft, that doesn't mean that the Patriots were good at drafting. They were terrible at drafting because they got Tom Brady in the 6th round. They should have drafted him in the 1st round
Right.
because he was the best player by far. And if any team could do well, like so it's like kind of like Mahomes. Like the Chiefs went up and got him higher than most people would have picked him, and he did better even than that.
Right.
Although you could also say the Chiefs should have tried to go to number one or as high as possible. Like maybe again you could say, well, you have to manage it and things like that. But if you assume that other people know what they're doing,
Well,
maybe number 10 was too low.
yeah. So in this scenario, they did pass over a catcher who was expected to be a better prospect and closer to the major leagues. If he ends up being even okay, gets the major leagues first, as expected, I think this pick's going to look pretty bad pretty fast, potentially.
Well,
But it's like every person that he passed over is a chance for that to be a failure, and he's actually looking like at a very low percentage to be right, though, too, right? As a general manager making this,
you could also say that about Patrick
right.
Mahomes.
It's going to look really good.
You remember
The odds
Deshaun
of being right
Watson
are pretty low.
everybody thought the Chiefs were going to take Deshaun Watson because that was the second. They skipped over Deshaun Watson to get Mahomes. Mahomes sat on the bench the whole year, and Deshaun Watson actually started several games, and he was really good that first year. We thought, oh, maybe Watson
Maybe they
was
actually
the pick,
missed.
and then of course Watson. It's like that early, like being there first doesn't mean that
Not necessarily meaningful.
Yeah,
but it could be,
it could be.
At least, and it's the next point that you might evaluate.
I hope Mitchell turns out to be better than Teal. I do not hope that Teal, however, turns into off the field Deshaun Watson. I hope he has he's an outstanding citizen and a high quality
yes.
But I would like to see that win for the Royals because when they went safe in college, at least in my memory, and I don't remember every draft pick that well, but that was the Christian Cologne draft, and they went when they went they go risky in high school a lot, and you miss a lot of those, but.
Well, I mean, just from the drafts that we looked at the last 13 seasons, they have not been good at selecting players, and Dayton Moore and JJ Piccolo have been the guys in charge of all of those drafts, and I don't know why we should trust Piccolo's selections in any way based on performance that we've already, seen, at least anyway.
Yeah. It's hard to like we mentioned before, though, is it drafting or is it developing? And now the Royals have, you could say, well, maybe it was development, and Piccolo is continuing good drafting that Moore had, but now they have different people running the minor leagues
Yeah.
mostly. It's and you could say, well, maybe it's just a development thing, and
But
I
the
guess we'll
problem
see.
with the argument there is that Piccolo was the person that was in charge of player development when Moore was the GM. So, he's left it in a capacity that does not seem like it's, capable of developing players. Now, not only is he not, has he set the tone for the development system, but also is now drafting the players himself. So why do we think that he's going to be able to do any of this?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, even when the Royals were really good, their drafting really sucked.
Yeah,
Like their first round draft picks. Let me run through these first round draft picks, like in like the Royals um
the Dayton Moore
heyday,
era started in 2007, if that helps.
2007. Well, I was thinking actually the 70s and 80s when the
No,
Royals were good, and when they drafted number one first round versus other rounds. Okay, so they had a really good first round draft pick in 1974 with Willie Wilson, and then they didn't get that much out of the rest of the draft cuts that they signed. So Willie Wilson was 74. 75 was Clint Hurdle. I don't know if you remember
yeah,
him. He was supposed to
future
be a huge star, but he
manager.
was he was Persian manager, but he only had 2.7 WAR in his whole career. 76, Ben Griesbeck, uh, no WAR, never made it. The Royals draft that year, the number one player was Ken Phelps. Do you remember him? He was traded to the Mariners, and then the Mariners traded the Yankees traded Jay Buhner for Ken Phelps, and Frank Costanza got really mad that George Steinbrenner traded Jay Buhner. You know, a rocket for an arm, and my baseball guys like Ken Phelps back. They like Ken Phelps, so that's their best. He had 9.4 WAR, so that was they only had two people who made the majors from the 1976 draft for the Royals. That seems low, right?
Well, I mean, those were like perennial playoff teams there too, so they probably didn't really care that much about development
Maybe.
in some of those seasons, at least anyway.
1977, they have the highest ranked WAR player who made the majors was 0.0.
That's not great. Made the majors, did not contribute anything to the majors, barely.
He actually played in one game, had one at bat.
Yeah.
Um, Mike Jones was the number one pick that year, and he played a few seasons. He played a little bit for the Royals, 71 games. But then 1978, number one overall pick, Buddy Biancalana, who sucked. He had a funny name, but
Yeah.
he was like, the shortstop position was so terrible as an offensive position for the Royals. Like it was Onyx Concepcion or Angel Salazar or like all these like really bad hitting players.
That continued
Alonso
on
was
for quite
part
some
of that
time
too.
now. And it wasn't just that era. The Terry Shumpert years, the
Yeah, David Howard. Yeah,
David Howard, yes.
The Royals' best draft pick in 1978 was Frank Viola, who didn't sign. He was a good player in the city.
Yeah.
Like 79, let's say 79 draft pick. Atlee Hammaker, who had less than 10 WAR, and he played mostly for the Giants. Um, like so, like it's one of those things. Like even like in the glory days, their draft is terrible. Frank Wills was number 1980, less than one WAR, first round draft pick. 81. Dave Leeper, we mentioned, I think,
Right.
before we went on the air, was minus 1.2. Mark Gubza was second round.
Yeah.
And David Cohn
That was
was
the
third
third.
round that year. And Shane Mack, who never signed with the Royals, was a solid player for a while, um, was in the fourth round. So, but um, even like the picks, Will Clark was a fourth round draft pick for the Royals, but he didn't sign.
Mm.
But they had picked a guy named John Morris in the first round who had minus 0.6 WAR. Gary Thurman, 1983 overall first round pick. I remember you were high on Gary Thurman at one point when we were very little. I think you had a card of his, but he was minus 2.8 WAR in his
I think
career.
he came to the baseball card shop and I had an autograph
That's what it was.
picture
Yeah,
of
you were
his. Yeah. Like
Remember
he may
Scott?
have been like the first major leaguer that I like saw in
Yeah.
person, I think.
Yeah. Then there was
Yeah.
Scott Bankhead. You might remember he was traded to the Mariners before he, I think, started with the Royals or just barely started with the Royals.
Yeah.
Um, Ryan McRae and Mike McFarland were in the same draft. The Royals also drafted Deion Sanders
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in '85. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was the year before they drafted Bo Jackson, right? Yeah, round four.
Yeah.
Tony Clements was number one overall pick.
Mm.
He never made it. Yeah, so like I don't know. The draft is a crapshoot, and even like when Kevin
Mm.
Apier was a good one in 1987, and there's Terry Shumpert in uh in almost 900 games, Shumpert was minus point 0.2 WAR. So that's a lot of games for being a below replacement
Yeah.
level player. So like anyway, I guess we're going on too long for the Royals draft, but like we have no idea really. And
Right. Well,
grade
mostly this is just to note what our immediate thoughts are, right? And
yeah,
it seemed like they went as they went through the draft, like at least that they, one of the things I was like disappointed to see, at least anyway, was that they didn't get anywhere close to the prospect expectation numbers from like the third and fourth picks too. They picked way down. The number 66 pick, they took the 129th ranked pick. The 75th pick of the draft, they took the 234th projected pick. So they were, I mean, seemingly trying to save money on the slot value to try to draft people later, which they got a 56 in the fourth round, which is, better. Somebody had slid that far, at least anyway.
yeah,
So, it still seems like they're probably going to come under the salary expectations for the slot values added across the draft. So it looks as though they probably are underspending on the minor league system is probably what the expectation would be from right now, at least anyway. But we'll see how that shakes out over the next couple months and
yeah.
when they sign and when the players sign.
I think their later picks that were seen as picks that they could sign for more money because they were like higher ranked prospects, but people thought they were going to go to college, so they were a riskier
Yeah.
sign rather than a riskier player. So like
Also, in
maybe
that section of the draft, they actually took mostly college players, and then there were a few high school players they took even later. In the middle part of the draft, they were mostly college players.
yeah,
Mostly
I was thinking of the lowest of the low rounds, like um
they went back to
in
high school towards the end.
yeah, 18, 19, and 20.
Yes, we're very
Stone
in.
Russell, Donovan LaSalle, and Blake Wilson were all high school.
Yes,
Um, and then like the middle, yeah,
mostly
so
college players in the
yeah,
bulk of the 4 through picks in the fourth round through their like 16th round or 17th round were all college players.
yeah. Sometimes those college seniors can be good picks because they have no leverage. They can't go back to school and they can't
Yes, right.
do anything else. So like you just give them like $5,000 signing bonus and then pay them peanuts for a while, and then like
Yeah.
maybe they turn into Whit Merrifield or something like that.
Right.
And
So we had made a prediction about how many pitchers would be taken in the draft by the Royals.
yes, I think I said 13.
I said 11, and the number was 11, but
Well,
there was a two-way player taken, so it's actually 12, and so it split the difference, I think, between
the
our
difference.
picks.
And if you want,
Neither of us were
Blake
right,
Mitchell,
but also neither of us were wrong. Something
yeah,
like that.
or you could even say Blake Mitchell is a two-way player
Could be.
because he was seen as having a strong arm. I'll take the split the difference.
I think they've
Um,
also said that the second round pick, Walters, may also play first base or something though too. So that could go
so
the other
maybe
way.
there's like four Shohei Otanis
Yeah.
on the team.
I think they said there were close to 10 or so players taken in the draft that are considered two-way players. And so that seems to be like a more popular concept, at least because of Otani, right?
Yeah,
I think we'll see a lot more people trying to do that, at least anyway.
that's interesting because you would say that in most sports specialization is occurring more, and like in football especially, you don't see any two-way players or anybody who does like kicking and punting anymore, really. Johnny Hecker I kind of did for a while, but like they'll do the pooch punt or maybe you don't really even see the punter kicking off in the kickoff game anymore. Like kind of there'd be like a kick
Kind of a
special.
thing for a
There would
while.
be like a kick specialist, I guess. So or
Yeah,
something, or the punter would be the guy who did the kickoffs. You see now it's more really just I mean it's just roster construction. Although I guess you could say it's specialization. There's less specialization in some parts because you don't have a fullback very much anymore. And you think,
yeah,
oh, the tight end can play fullback, or the tight end's kind of a hybrid wide receiver, and you want these kind of in between guys. So
yeah.
maybe it's going back the other
You can
way
sort of
to
use a tight end like a fullback if they're in motion and they start the play when they're
yeah,
sort of about where the fullback would be when they're like crossing
yeah.
or right for a
Going
game.
back to the total football
Yes,
school of the 1970s Dutch
yes.
teams and
Is that what the Bills are
Ajax
aiming for now?
Amsterdam. Yeah, yeah. We want well, I guess Lamar Jack, like quarterbacks have become more about running and passing, and in some ways that's like a back to the future because like in the early days of football, the quarterback did run it more than he passed,
Mm,
and it's like and for some reason it's seen as a modern innovation, but really it's not because teams are much more run heavy, and so the quarterbacks would be mobile, but they wouldn't be like great passers and great throwers. You pick
yeah, sure.
I don't know. So, oh,
But
should we talk about
anyway,
the Royals
maybe
season?
well, maybe the final note on the draft before we move on. There was a grade from Bleacher Report shortly after the draft. They did rank the Royals draft as a C minus, which was the lowest grade given. We don't necessarily, know that this is going to be accurate or not, but maybe we should, save this grade to look back on it in a couple of years and see if Bleacher
Yeah,
Report knows what they're talking about or not.
it'll look like the idea. Hopefully, it'll look like the Mahomes Chiefs draft when the Chiefs reached for Mahomes and he was like a C. People gave the Chiefs draft like a C ish, right? Because Deshaun Watson was available,
Yeah,
or why'd they get him? And like people thought, Trubisky, he's the best quarterback, so that was a good draft by the Bears.
but in that case, though, the Chiefs had won enough games that they would not have gotten Mahomes unless they made a trade to move up to go get
Right.
him. Where here, the Royals lost so many games that they should have earned the fifth pick in the draft, but instead, because of the draft rules for this year, lost out to the eighth pick because of the lottery. But then they went down and took the 14th pick without, getting anything for doing that. So like they could have won a lot more games and still gotten this particular pick. I don't like seeing that as a strategy
Well,
because we don't need to be losing this much to do the draft strategy that Piccolo wants to do. And I don't like seeing that just because if you're going to lose that much, you'd hope that you'd get, something who is projected to be the best guy or near the best player in the draft,
Mitchell was the best high school catcher.
but not the
Uh,
best catcher.
Well, he was there were only two catchers like in the top 100, and
Yeah.
so he was like 14. So like you would say, he was probably 14 because a lot of people thought of him as being riskier than the college guy, but maybe he has more upside. And if you think he's good, I don't think
But the other guy was 7. You picked 8. The team that was 7 picked somebody at 9, so the 7 was still available. You actually got access to a guy that was
but
ranked
that
higher than your slot, and
that's also saying
you
that
take somebody
those
from a
rankings
riskier
are doing a
position.
good job.
It's just a lot of risk. You're just
You have
taking
no idea.
unnecessary risk as a GM. I think that's my opinion, at least.
Well, it could also be that Mitchell was going to be taken the next pick. They thought by the ninth team or whatever. So like, we
But if
have
you're
no idea.
drafting based on what you think a team behind you in the draft is doing, then you're still stupid. That's very
I'm going to say this is the Royals' best draft in years,
yeah.
and
I'm
I
very
I don't
pessimistic on it right now.
I don't think what'd you say?
I'm very pessimistic on it now.
Pessimistic. I'm pretty
I think
optimistic about it because
I
partly
think I
because
just
I
think
think
it looks more like Dayton Moore is still there, and
yeah
the whole point of him not being here was to not have Dayton Moore decisions being made, and this looks like Dayton Moore to me.
I like the negative reaction because I think there's no correlation between the draft grade immediately and how that does later. And if anything, it makes me more excited because it would prove that like the uh pundits, I guess, wrong. But none
Yeah,
of those people have any real knowledge. Like it's it's one of those things where like, yeah,
including us. We don't
it's
know.
easy. Yeah, I think it's easy to say, well, I told you so, but you have no real basis of the I told you so until, because like it could be anything. There's like, you
True,
know,
true.
and even when teams are good, their drafts usually suck. And you happen to get like one player that's good, or you make some trade of a player that some other team drafted, or you make an international signing that was good. And like,
Yeah.
it's I don't um
Well,
you
probably the
wouldn't like
most important player the Royals have taken in quite some time has been Sal, and he didn't come to the draft, right?
no.
So there's always that.
And really the Royals, unless they've had like a top 2 or 3 pick, they haven't had real success from the draft. And hitters like, Hosmer was 2, I think Gordon was 2.
Aaron Pro.
um yeah, yeah, he was like 7 or something. But when they take a hitter really really high, usually he's been except for Cologne. Moustakas was a 3, I think, overall.
Yeah.
So but yeah, it's such a crapshoot.
Yes.
And I think
Probably shouldn't
if,
even have spent this much time talking about it, but
well, it's also one of those things like where we could say like, why even have a scouting department when it's such a crapshoot? Why not just follow those lists?
yeah,
But if it turns out better this time, they didn't follow the list. Maybe, like, I guess if it's your first time, maybe you want to take a risk. I don't know.
yeah,
But maybe next year he should just find the MLB.com list
yeah.
and pick.
Just take the best available. Just try it. Just give it a shot.
But the Royals got a C- in the draft. I think they got even worse grades according to ESPN about their season progress so far. Right?
They did. I believe they also received the lowest grade in an ESPN Plus article ranking the midseason scores for all teams. Royals received an F minus, like
F-.
lower than the Oakland A's even. So
Yeah, I guess it's because of expectations. Everybody knew the A's were going to be terrible. But they didn't think the Royals were. They didn't think the Royals would be good, but I don't think anybody thought the Royals would be this bad, like historically bad. So I kind of agree with. I don't know if I don't know if F- is a. It's not really a grade. That's not real. I don't.
right,
it's one of those things that giving 110%. You can't fail plus, um,
right,
which is what
or
an F
fail
minus.
minus.
Yeah, like do worse than failure. So I think of F- would actually be in some ways, if you're a failing grade, it's a super fail. So you would think that you would add to the fail, but maybe, or I guess I don't know.
I
But
don't know. Lower than
because you're skipping,
lowest
because really it's A, B, C, D, and F. So like F is not really a grade, because if it were a grade, it would be E, and and that would be the failing grade, would be E. But they decided to call it fail rather than, because A, B, C, D, they don't stand for anything, but
Yeah,
F stands for fail. So it's like its own. It's a letter, but it's only a letter because all the other things are letters.
right.
So it's not. So I would say it's not really a grade. You know, um, that's my theory. I don't know where that came. I don't know exactly where that came. So I think you could fail plus. F
Yeah,
plus would be fine because it would be its own scale. Super.
yeah. But still, the lowest grade on the midseason report card for the major league team, the lowest grade for the draft post draft analysis. Not looking so great as of today
No,
as a Royals
but
fan.
yeah, yeah.
Or would you take this one positive note from the Royals? They did win the final game before the All-Star break. The All-Star break was 4 days long. Tonight's game, we're recording this on a Friday night, was rained out. So they have gone now 6 days, calendar days, without a loss. Do you count that as a bit of a bright spot?
Well, if there had been more than one win in that
Hmm.
window maybe, but this was just because there was a long we had the All-Star break and then and then the rainouts, and so like it's
Yeah,
possible the Royals will lose 2 games in one day, which
I don't know, potentially.
like would you say that losing 2 games in one day is like the worst thing that could happen? But it's still just 2 games in a row, so like it doesn't really matter like how the games are spaced. The Royals have won one game, even if it would be kind of
That's
funny if they
6
lost two
days
in one
without a
day
loss.
and they lost 0 in the whole 6 days before.
I believe they
But
have not gone more than 2 days without a loss to this point in the season until this week, Mike.
I yeah, I'm seeing another. I'm looking at another grade for the draft.
Hmm.
This is the Sporting News. They just did the first round picks.
Yeah.
So Pirates, Skeens was an A. Dylan Cruz was an A for the Nationals. Max Clark was a B plus for the Tigers. Number 3, Langford was an A. The Twins, Walker Jenkins was an A. The Oakland A's number 6 actually got a C plus.
Hmm.
Jacob Wilson, Grand Canyon,
High
and then
school.
the
Oh,
Reds got an
that's college. Yeah.
Grand Canyon University. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
like I guess it's one of those fake online colleges, but I think they do have
Right.
a campus. Um, but this Reds got an A. So like everybody got an A mostly, and the Royals got C plus, Rockies B plus. But then it was like later in the draft, like everybody gets an A basically according to Sporting News.
They just really didn't like that drafting the college catcher. It seems like that, like they've all
The high
latched
school
on
catcher,
to
yeah,
that. Because they even said that almost immediately in the MLB coverage on ESPN of the draft. I actually watched the show for a bit anyway, and they did mention that almost immediately.
yeah. And I don't think so. It
But
says only 5 of 18 first round high school catchers since 2010 have reached the majors. There's 2 of positive WAR. Um, but
yeah,
again, those aren't the same players, and just because you were picked as a catcher doesn't mean you'll end up as a catcher either. So
right.
Mike Sweeney was a catching prospect at one point.
Yes.
David Ortiz, I believe, was
Oh,
he a catcher at one point?
I don't know about that.
I I don't know why I'm thinking David Ortiz. Um, no, I don't. Maybe I don't know. I think I'm.
I don't remember that, but I don't know.
No,
Also,
he was. No, he was always a first base DH. Okay.
uh,
I don't know why I thought he was a catcher, but sometimes the catchers don't stick with catching, and
right.
the pitchers
Well, I
don't stick with
mean,
pitching.
just looking at this year's Royals roster, they've seemingly decided that MJ Melendez is going to be an outfielder and not a catcher, so he could focus more on hitting and not having to switch positions, even though they keep flipping where he is in the outfield, either left or right. They just keep switching him forth. So I don't know how that's supposed to be, better than not catching. But also he's been terrible in the outfield. So there's still that, you know.
Yeah, so the Royals, it seems like, are not able to develop their talent at the major league level. Maybe their development stops. Maybe the problem is the major league level. Their development doesn't go further. I don't know. Because it's just, yeah, the Royals are really bad. Do we want to keep talking about the Royals, or do we want to move on to
Just move on.
um, our novelty topics involving the NFL?
Well, there are this very busy NFL news week.
Yeah.
Yes.
Probably the biggest story of the NFL this week was it was not even about a current player, it was a former player, former longtime San Diego, then Los Angeles Chargers quarterback, and then 1 year with the Indianapolis Colts quarterback. Philip Rivers announced he was having his 10th child with his wife. They're very Catholic, and so they have lots of kids. Um,
10
what do
kids.
you what do you think of Philip Rivers and his many kids, or what do you think of Philip Rivers in general? Do you think he is a potential Hall of Fame quarterback?
Hmm. I mean, if they counted children as Hall of Fame credentials, then he should go straight to the Hall of Fame though. But it
Well,
seems
he's not. He's
most of
yeah.
the voters, Hall of Fame voters, tend to look at championships as the for some reason, metric for whether or not you should be in or out.
Well, I think a quarterback. I think some of that is important because you want a quarterback to perform at the highest level in the biggest game. So you want them to like, at least have some playoff success. In some ways, winning the Super Bowl is a little bit random, but like overall, you want them to like at least have a solid record of leading the teams to the playoffs and then winning games in the playoffs. Because quarterback is seen as like very, very important compared to even the other positions. So, but I think it also gets outsized by, well, it's a huge team that's you're usually playing on a team of 22 and you don't play defense if you're a quarterback. So you're not really in control like you are in basketball or something.
Yeah.
But,
so
yeah,
Will himself, he now has a whole team.
oh yeah, he does 10 plus 11. Yeah, his wife could be the black, be a backup, or I guess probably the baby would be a backup at this point because a baby would be the worst football player out of the 12 Riverses.
I mean, you would assume, but I mean, maybe there's one that's very uncoordinated. You don't know.
Anybody that can walk, I think, is going to be better than a baby. Um, Anyone that can control their movements more and not commit, you know, untimely false start penalties,
Yes.
I think would be better than somebody that couldn't do that. I think a little. So when you have more control over your gross and fine motor skills, you're going to be a little bit better. But yeah, I would say the younger children will be the worst players. And I'm not sure how old Philip Rivers' oldest kids are.
Oh, I think I saw in the article. It was like 20 or so, 2021.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's pretty spread out.
Oh, he has a daughter who is 21.
Yeah.
Just turned 21 a few days ago. So Hallie Rivers. Um, so there's Hallie is 20, Caroline is 17. It's a lot of girls at first. Uh, um, Allie's 20, so she's 21 now. 17, Caroline, 16, Grace, 14, Gunner. It's mostly girls. Sarah, Peter, Rebecca, Claire, Hannah, and then I think another boy. I think it's seven. I think it's going to be 7 and 3
Hmm.
girls to boys. So not saying that girls aren't as good football players, but you would you would say, well, maybe the Rivers family is pretty traditional since they have so many kids, and it's probably, I would assume, a stay-at-home mother, very Catholic. Probably the male-female traditional roles will be embraced more. So you would think that boys would be better, even if they weren't naturally disposed to be.
So not as many bolo ties as you were expecting though out of the
Well,
full.
women can wear bolo ties. I think Linda Ronstadt probably would. Um, yeah, But yeah, the bolo tie, that was Philip Rivers' most popular fashion accessory. Um, is there anything else about Philip Rivers that you're uh, that rings a bell for you, that you think of when you think of Philip Rivers? Do you think of anything else besides his bolo ties, his many kids, his lengthy, solid, but maybe not overwhelmingly successful career? I think he's probably regarded as the third, or as there's three. I think three quarterbacks were drafted the same year as Rivers in the first round. That was Ben Roethlisberger, and then Eli Manning was number one, and Rivers was like 4 or 5, and then Roethlisberger was like 12 or 13. Of those three quarterbacks, do you think one is more likely to be in the Hall of Fame than the others?
Well,
How would you rank? How would you rank them?
I think two will end up there, possibly three, but yeah, two. It seems like Roethlisberger almost for sure will get in, and Eli probably will too
Yeah, well, Roethlisberger
because of the
has
championships. But I
yeah,
think that's yeah. Eli's
Roethlisberger has the
I think
championships, but
one of
he
the
also
but
has some more stats than Manning did, I think. So I think that's probably what puts him over the top. Roethlisberger like led the NFL in passing yards sometimes, and like
yeah,
was a I think he never was a first team All Pro quarterback, but it's hard to be first team All Pro in the NFL because there's only one. Like it's not like the AL or NL Cy Young or AL and NL MVP. There's only
yeah.
one quarterback that gets it, and so they had Peyton Manning and Tom Brady most of his career. So Drew
And
Brees,
Roethlisberger and
yeah,
right was there
yeah,
also, right? Yeah.
yeah. So like he was probably number four out of that kind of era. But I would say, Eli Manning, he went to the two with the Giants, and that might put him in just because the games they beat the Patriots both times.
Right.
Um, like if they had beaten the um, some lesser team, like like oh the Raiders squeaked in or the Chargers, or if they had beaten less like sort of lesser teams. In some ways, like the Patriots beat a lot of kind of iffy NFC championship teams, or like teams that only made it to one Super Bowl, like
Yeah.
the Panthers. They beat the Panthers, but it was barely, and they beat the um I guess they beat the Rams early on their in their second trip, but then they all beat the Rams again later. But that was the Rams only. I guess that was the Rams' first time there, or I don't know. It seems like they had the Eagles. They beat when the Eagles were the it was Donovan McNabb and stuff like that. So it wasn't always the best teams that they played
Yeah.
in the Super Bowl, but
You can only play the team that's there though, right?
more titanic matchups
Yeah.
in the Super Bowl because they played what was seen as like the best team in the opposing conference, or like had like big names. Like the 49ers were really good that year when the Chiefs played them, and they were seen as like kind of deserving NFC champions. And the Buccaneers, of course, when they lost, and this year's Eagles in the league. Um, I don't think that was always the case with the Patriots, but maybe I'm just poo-pooing their greatness.
Yeah.
But it was just going back. It was, I think, because the Giants beat what was seen as the best team.
Sure.
That's like those are like bigger Super Bowl championships
Yeah.
than like regular ones, maybe.
But Eli still has two.
Mm-hmm.
Roethlisberger had
Two.
two. Philip Rivers
Rivers
had
zero.
and no appearances even,
I
right?
think he had like one AFC Championship game appearance.
Yeah.
Um, he did make well, he didn't make an All Pro. He never was first team All Pro either. So like he didn't have the individual like it wasn't like he has had really big individual success. But he if you rank it by passing yards, Philip Rivers is less than 1,000 yards behind Roethlisberger in his career. He's about 7,000 more than Peyton Manning in passing yards.
Well,
In touchdowns, Rivers is 6 overall in passing touchdowns. Three ahead of Ben Roethlisberger.
yeah.
One ahead of Dan Marino. Uh, ahead of him are Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and but Eli Manning is also on that list. So is Matt Ryan. I don't Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson. I'm not sure Carson Palmer's not that far down. I don't know if any of those guys are necessarily going to be Hall of Fame players, but um, anyway, that was really what I wanted to talk about for football.
Yeah.
Nothing really happened other than the Jets restructured their defensive tackle, or they signed their young defensive tackle Quinn Williams to a new deal that supposedly might set the um, number range for Chris Jones. And some rumors say that if Chris Jones gets a new deal, there will be more salary cap space, and then the Chiefs can sign somebody like DeAndre Hopkins. That's not a free agent. You see any of that happening? Do you see any of those things happening? The
I mean,
Jones deal, maybe.
I think they'll restructure Chris Jones's deal and what extend him for a couple years. I think
Yeah,
that's what they usually would end up doing here anyway, right?
yeah.
It seems like they will probably do that to free up some cash for something, but yeah, I don't know if they can free up enough that they would be able to get Hopkins though.
Hopkins, yeah, because I
I
think
just
Hopkins wants what Beckham got, which is like 15 million a year. Maybe he'll take 10 or 12, but like I could see maybe the Chiefs will take unlike like incentives or something, maybe like a 5 and then maybe up to 10 or so with incentives, or 11. But
yeah,
I don't really see it happening, but it would be cool to have. I maybe to have, of course, DeAndre Hopkins, one of the maybe himself a potential Hall of Fame um level uh wide receiver, especially if he wins a champion, if he were to win a championship,
Yeah.
um, whether it's with the Chiefs or another team, that would maybe. I think he's like five-time first team All Pro wide receiver. Of course, there are two wide receivers on the All Pro team, so he's be one of the top two rather than
Yes.
one. But he was a really good player with a lot of not so great quarterbacks, even in Houston. So I don't, but he's getting older,
As are we all.
as are we all. He was born in 1992, and so he is 13 and a half years younger than us. So that's how old we are.
That is getting kind of old for a wide receiver, though.
Yeah, unless you're Jerry Rice and play until you're like 45,
Right.
right? And he,
And still productive in those last several years, too, right?
yeah, he was. I played until he was his age 42 season. Uh, he got traded. Did you know? I don't remember him. He got traded to Seattle in 2004. I remember him as an Oakland. He played for Oakland, but apparently he played for Seattle at the end of the year in
Hmm.
2004.
Hmm.
He didn't play like he only had 429 yards total in those games season, but he was traded in the middle of the season. But
Yeah.
I guess he wasn't getting played in Oakland, and he wanted to get traded. So,
Yeah, it must be.
um, but yeah, he had some good. He had a 1,200 plus yard receiving season at age 40. Jerry Rice did, so that's not bad.
Productive.
Yeah, he was. Um, yeah, he had two 1,000 yard plus seasons with Oakland, and then almost 1,000 in 2003 when he was 41. So um, he had a renaissance in Oakland with Rich Gannon, and maybe Tim Brown was still there. I think as another kind of old uh, receiver.
Yeah.
Is Tim Brown in the Hall of Fame?
No idea.
He is. He is in the Hall of Fame. But
Yeah.
we could talk about more football players if you wanted, but I don't really have anything else to add to today's uh, Wonder Power. We're actually going to come back probably faster next week. We had said we were going to come back faster after last week's, but we had another kind of scheduling conflict, so we'll have less than a week before next week's comes out. But then we also might have a break because I'm taking the bar exam, so who knows what's going to happen. Summer programming, so people who are religiously waiting every Thursday morning for our um, podcast to drop, as the kids say. Um, we might have different days, so just yeah, like stay keep your eyes peeled, I guess, or your notifications on. And I guess on that note, do we have anything further?
Well, I think so.
Well, this has been another super exciting and riveting, hard hitting, wide ranging uh, edition of the Warning Track Power Hour. And as always, I am Dr. Michael Werman. He is Dr. Adrian Scaff. We are the Warning Track Power Hour. Please like and or subscribe to our podcasts channel, available wherever you might listen to your podcasts. But if you're hearing me tell you this, you already know where to find the YouTube podcast. So it's my advice to you is not, it doesn't really matter. It's moot.
Keep it
You
up.
already
Just keep up the good work, right?
yeah, keep up the good work. We really appreciate your viewership, listenership, uh, friendship, because we'd certainly be friends with you if you. We're very approachable. We'll appear to be. Anyway, we'll at least carry that illusion for people that they would be friends. Uh,
Accurate.
guys, you'd have a beer with type of thing. George W. Bush, why he got so many votes. Um, compared to certain, John Kerry or something. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
Just like that.
maybe that's why Joe Biden beat Trump, because even I don't know, yeah, even like I think, well, I bet people would want to have people who vote anyway. They'd probably want to agree with it.
But there is an important fact there too, though, is that Trump doesn't drink. So
Oh yeah, and he gets those well done steaks. So maybe it wouldn't be as with ketchup. It wouldn't be as fun for a meal.
that's the reason.
Maybe that's what. Well, people say, well, I guess we'd rather be with Joe Biden than Hillary. You would say. So like that was maybe for some people, they were on that fence. So they was like, I don't want to. I don't really want to have a beer with Trump, but he's better than Hillary to have a beer with. But he's worse than Joe Biden, and that's why maybe they switched. It was that small segment of the have a beer population
Right. That apparently
couldn't
decides elections, though. So
apparently decides elections. The
but
undecided, the undecided voter who is still um,
somehow has
undecided.
not been able
Did
to
you
decide.
going back to politics? Did you know that Ron DeSantis? Do you know how old he is?
No.
He's our age. He is 44.
I was gonna say maybe 50-ish, but I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
he seems like he'd be like 58 with his like. How
Yeah.
does somebody like that be that young? Um, but yeah, he is September 14th, 1970. So he's about 1 month older than you,
Wow.
about 3 months older.
So what have we done with our lives, Mike? We're not governors of states.
No. And the previous governor of Florida, Rick Scott, was an alumnus of North Kansas City High School, and he was the worst governor of Florida probably until DeSantis came along. I guess we're exposing our political leanings here now, but anyway, uh, on that note, maybe I'll reiterate my little sign off. As always, I am Dr. Michael Werman. He is Dr. Andrew Scaff. We are the Warning Track Power. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel /. And best of luck to your teams as they emerge from the Major League Baseball All-Star break. I guess we didn't talk about the All-Star game where the National League beat the American League 3-2, but
The home run derby at all.
yeah,
We didn't talk about that
I
either.
didn't follow. Who won the home run derby?
It was let's see, Randy Arozarena lost in the final to Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Ooh, Vlad Guerrero Jr. Did Vlad Guerrero Sr. ever win a home run derby?
He did. So they are the first father-son combo to have won
Okay.
derbies.
So you might have thought maybe it was Cecil and Prince
Yeah,
Fielder. Um, but
Barry and
it's
Bobby. But they didn't.
maybe they probably
They,
didn't have the
they
derby
didn't bring
back
up.
then.
That's probably why, right? They
Or the
maybe.
Kent or the Griffies, maybe you could
Yeah.
say. But
No.
yeah, so the Vlads uh are the best father and son home run derby tandem, I suppose, so far.
Definitively.
Maybe did Dante Bichette ever win one? Will Bo Bichette be in the home run derby? I don't think.
Hmm.
He's not really a big power guy in the same way that neither was Dante really, but
Well, Dante was in Colorado anyway, so.
yeah, everybody was. Yeah, he was in Colorado.
But again, like you said, so was everybody.
It seems like we're digressing again. We'll talk about these topics maybe if we remember them next time on the Warning Truck Power Hour. But until we meet again, we'll wish you a good day.